we'll start out with a flow that has an invitation to some experience, just a little internal visit with ourselves. And then I'll offer some definitions and some terms and just a little background information. And then we'll have an opportunity to grow in acquaintance with a few Christian mystics, and we'll see how our time goes and to how much discussion we have as to how many mystics we visit with. And then we'll have some questions and answers. And of course, if a question comes up and you'd like to ask it as we're going along, I think that would be okay. We have a small group and we can be flexible. So what I'd like to invite everyone to do now is, oh, Dennis, do you have the ability to turn on the original sound for musicians? Here we go. I'm going to ring the bowl. And then go ahead and shut off that original sound. Back to right below there. Noise removal. There we go. Thank you. So as I rang the bowl, I hope that kind of felt to you like a summons to silence, a summons to just dial down the energy level. And if you feel comfortable, I invite you to shut your eyes or else just kind of gaze at something boring like the carpet or the table or something. And I'm just going to offer a few questions for your consideration. The first question is, what is your sense of your own presence here? Your physical presence, your heart presence, your mind presence, here and now. Where are you sensing this in yourself? And how might you be sensing it? Just your sense of being here, being alive. And then as you continue to explore that, another question would be, what is your sense of God right here, right now? And where in your being or how does this God presence feel to you? Where are you sensing it? There's no right answer. And the answer could be, I don't sense God right now. That's a fair answer. So rather than striving to find the right answer or the right experience, trust what your experience is. And that even the absence of God is an experience. And then I'd like to offer a little invitation. If you'd like to do this, feel free. And if you prefer not to, just skip. I invite you to notice your breath and explore receiving the breath rather than taking the breath. I am being breathed. The sacred bellows is breathing me into being over and over. And then perhaps notice how your body receives this breath. And you might notice how your body is right now, how you're inhabiting it. What is your body telling you? Just a little gently noticing our bodies. And then moving to your heart. Notice how your heart is right here, right now. Doesn't matter if it's a happy feeling or a sad feeling, whatever your feelings, whatever your heart is like, closed or open. It's noticing. Do you feel connected? Do you feel separate? And then finally bringing your awareness to the mind and noticing, what are my thought patterns? Am I hyper-focused on something? Am I scattered or numb? And maybe noticing our favorite topics, things that we kind of ruminate on. And now, as you receive that breath through body, heart, and mind, I invite us all to go back to the original questions of, how do you sense your own presence here now? What is your sense of God? God's presence or absence right now? And as you're kind of taking an impression of what's going on inside yourself, I invite you to begin to expand your awareness to include the room that we're in, those of us who are gathered in person, and then those of us who are gathered on Zoom. We're all together here. And then I invite anyone who would like to, as you open your eyes, if they've been closed, to perhaps just throw out a few words like, I didn't feel a thing, or I felt this, or this is my sense right now of how is your presence here and how is God's presence? And if you're on Zoom and you'd like to share, you could unmute yourself and just say something.
Yeah, it was like just a low hum through everything.
Could you say it one more time?
Like a low hum through everything.
A low hum through everything. Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
This is Jean. I just felt like a calming presence next to me.
Calming presence next to you. Thank you.
I'm gonna say like a calm abiding, the be still and know that I am God kind of phrases in my mind.
A calm abiding, the be still and know I am God sense. Anybody else?
The light.
The light.
Delight.
Delight.
Like happy.
Delight. What's interesting is we've had like an auditory, if I heard Greg properly, hum. We have some physical sensations, a heart sensation. We've got a multifaceted divine presence here.
Reassurance.
Reassurance. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, we have dipped into the mystical Christianity right here, right now together. And what I'd like to do now is just offer a few definitions. And so let's go ahead to the first slide, if we might, Dennis. Go to the next one. So one of the sources that I'm using for today is the big book of Christian Mysticism by McColman. And I have that listed at the end of the slides. And so if you don't remember it when I just said it, don't worry. And he defines mysticism very loosely. He's like, there's no book that can define mysticism definitively. It's just very, very subjective. But we can say that it implies a spirituality that is embodied, visceral, experiential. It's a here and now spirituality, even as it's calling us all into the eternal. And one thing he says is, put more simply, mysticism encompasses the adventure of spiritual living. That's mysticism in general, no matter what your particular faith background is. So now we'll go to the next slide. And Carl goes on to describe Christian mysticism, and he talks about this adventure of spiritual living. And he's talking about it as being embodied in the wisdom teachings of Jesus. And these teachings have been amplified and illuminated by further insights from Jesus' many followers throughout the ages. And there have been contemplative writers in many different centuries. And I'm just going to rattle off a few names. John the Baptist, Jesus himself, the disciple John, Desert Fathers and Mothers, John Cassian, Hildegard of Bingen, Francis of Assisi, Julian of Norwich, Teresa of Avila, Jean-Paul de Caussade, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Howard Thurman, and Thomas Merton. That's just a few. So let's go ahead and remove the slides for now. And I'm just going to offer a few quotes. And I invite us again, kind of experientially, to see how they resonate with us, how they land. So one is, love is real. God is love. And God dwells in your heart. This God who is love wants nothing more than for you, for each of us, to realize what is already ours. It's already ours. Limitless joy of union with the divine. And this allows us to see with compassion and to bring that compassion into our own life, into the service of others. And one thing to consider as we're going along here is, as Christians, we would all say that we are members of the body of Christ. That's a pretty big deal. We're talking about the God who created everything, God who is love, and we're participating in it, all of us. And it's a mystery, and that's where the word mysticism comes from, is it's a mystery. So another quote is, the deeper we get into any reality, the more numerous will be the questions that we cannot answer. So as we head into mysticism and mystical experience, we discover we know less and less, but somehow we're also transformed into this mystery of Christ at the same time. And then we have a daring quote from Karl Rahner, who was one of the contributors to the Second Vatican Council, a priest, and he says, the Christian of the future will be a mystic or will not exist at all. He said that in the 1960s. It sounds pretty harsh to me. You're a mystic or you're nothing. So are we going to be kicked out of relationship with God if we're not an official mystic? Nope. Because Carl goes on to describe who can be a mystic. And the answer is all of us. All of us. It is up to God to form our hearts as a unique expression of mystical awareness. So we're actually being formed by God into this mystical consciousness. So it's not our doing, it's a gift, it's a grace. If we're part of the body of Christ, we're not making it happen. We already are given this gift. So what is our role? We still have a role in this, which is to show up in ways that open us to the presence, to this mystical experience, to the sense of the divine here and now all the time. God will never force us to do this, but it is heart transforming, it's mind expanding, it's joyful. And as we've heard from other people here tonight, it's embodied. It's not like something we just think about, it's something we actually experience. And one of the clarifications also is that this is different from like religious observance or doing regular religious practices, because we're not just going through the motions, we're actually experiencing something different, and we're transformed as a process, as part of that process. So Christian mysticism, because it's all focused on the good in everyone and the beauty in everyone, invites us to an optimistic, positive outlook toward people, all people, which is a very handy dandy tool for these days to actually be able to transform our hearts and our minds and our awareness to see with God's eyes. And our job, another part of our job besides disposing ourselves to God's presence, is to be willing to become our unique expression of God's love, our own unique expression of that. So we don't really need to copy other people. We can take inspiration, but there's something unique about each of us. And we do this by consenting to God's presence in action. So I have a slide that lists a bunch of prayer types, and I just want to put it up there for a few minutes. It's not the first slide, Dennis, so we're going to need to go ahead a couple. Here, you want me to switch it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a long list, and I can make it more available to you by sending it out in an email later. But I just want to point out that there are 20 essential mystical prayer practices that Carl McColman describes in his book. And some of these are very familiar to you, like Lectio Divina, that was part of this series, that there was a training on that. The daily office, the Liturgy of the Hours, that many people in monasteries pray, and also lay people. Sacraments, giving and generosity, imaginative prayer, our work. The ora et labora of the Benedictine tradition is when we're doing our work with our hands, when we're washing the dishes, when we're doing the laundry, when we're fixing our car. This is work, this is prayer. It's not separate. Like mysticism is part of everything that we do. So I just wanted to put that up there. And I also want to point out that there is, near the bottom, there's acquired contemplation and infused contemplation. So those are big, terms, theological terms. But the idea is that acquired contemplation reflects the practices that we bring forward. And God helps us to foster this contemplation in our hearts, this awareness of God, our participation in God. And it's called acquired because we're doing something, like centering prayer, which is one of the things I really like to do, which is a practice of silent prayer, is just a practice to dispose myself to the presence of God. And then if I am given the gift of infused contemplation, I go beyond the frontier of what I could even imagine. And so when we open into mysticism, we're opening into mystery, we're opening into potential that we don't even know what we're getting into. Because we're opening ourselves to God, it's going to transform us, body, heart, and mind. And we're going to see things differently. We're going to notice things differently. We're going to find it's easier to forgive. We might be able to see a solution that we couldn't see before. There might be a softening of our heart. It'll be whatever we uniquely need to become that unique manifestation of the Christ presence here in the world. And if we already knew what it was, we would be doing it. But we don't know. It's kind of like we're just barely going to the next step. And I remember hearing Sister Helen Prejean speak one time, and she was talking about how we all want to have like headlights on our car where we can see where we're going. And like, I got the path, I know it, this is the mystical path. And she said, God doesn't give us headlights. He gives us a little pen light. It's like the little light that you can hardly see, And so when we're in the silence and we're listening to this hum or this stillness or this, like the delight, it's just like a taste. It's like it brings us to the next place of relationship. And that's part of the mystery of it. So if we knew where we were going, I imagine most of us would already have gone there. But I guess the journey is part of the trip. I mean, it is, it's the whole thing is what we're doing. So let's go back now to, here I can go back. Okay, so I'm going to put up this slide here, and we're going to go into a little bit of experience with some mystics. So this starts with a quote from John of the Cross. And John of the Cross lived in the 1500s, and you may have heard of him before. He talks about the dark night of the soul, for example. And the first quote that we have up here is, "The Father spoke one word from all eternity, and he spoke it in silence. And it is in silence that we hear it." And just noticing again, body, heart, and mind, how is this landing on each of us, in us? What is it evoking in us? And then Father Thomas Keating offered the next two quotes in relationship to this comment from John of the Cross. He says, "This suggests that silence is God's first language, and that all other languages are poor translations." And wasn't it interesting that when people were responding about what their experience was, just when we first opened, it was all silent. Nobody was, I mean, you could have heard God speaking to you in words, but that's not typically how it goes. And so then Thomas goes on to say that our practices, like those practices I just listed up on the screen, are ways of refining our receptive apparatus so that we can perceive the word of God communicating itself with ever greater simplicity to our spirit and our innermost being. Refining our receptive apparatus. And I kind of like to think of it like going outside on a sunny day and you have a parasol or an umbrella over you. You know, it's like the sun can't get to me. I have to move that umbrella over so that the sun can land on me. And so we do need to consent. We do need to open ourselves to it. But the beauty of it all is that we're made for it. It's just as natural as breathing, of receiving the breath. So let's just pause here for a second and see. Dennis, will you take the slide down again? And we'll have a time where people might share a little bit about anything that's come up for you in relationship to what mysticism is, or how silence being God's language. We're a pretty heady culture for the most part. We really like certainty. We like to know things.
That's what's heavily on my mind as you keep going through this. I was wondering if you might get to that soon, as the Western mind versus the Eastern mind.
Mm-hmm.
In the West, it's all about structure and system and language and definition and process, and we have to understand things. It's like the old adage, like, share the gospel, but when necessary, use words. I mean, we're just the opposite here. It's all about, definitions and structure and rules, and it seems like in the West we've lost touch with the ability to embody and become and truly just a sense of, anyways. I just was wondering if you'll get to this dichotomy between the Western world, if that has something to do with where it seems like maybe we're a little lost here in the West.
Yeah. Could you guys on Zoom hear him well enough?
I spoke quietly.
You could. Oh, good. Great. Go. Successful technology. I love that. Yeah.
I think with that slide that you put up, my first thought, and I'm glad I didn't say it, figuring out the first time, was this is totally not my thing. I spent time at Kenrick Glennon in St. Louis, and we were taught very rigid structures of prayer. Lectio Divina every Tuesday at 6 o'clock in the morning, kind of back to bed. And the liturgy of the hours, and I know these very rigid structures. So when you asked me to sit and think and how do I feel and what am I seeing, like that Ignatian spirituality, not for me. And then what were the first two things that were on your list of Christian mysticism? Lectio Divina and the daily office. I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't say that This is not my thing, but I understand how some of those more structured forms can be mysticism.
Yeah. Well, for
I would not have put those two together until we started this conversation.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Yeah, I personally feel like when I practice those more structured methods, it's kind of like God is sneaking in through the cracks. It's like by doing the practice, my mind, my being is preoccupied with something that is already pointing toward God. I'm already orienting myself toward God. And God is at work. And I might be saying these words, and maybe one of these words does pop out, but it could be that the spirit is up to something completely different. But I am present. I'm ready for it.
Good, I didn't know that at Kenrick, because when I was falling asleep during the 6 a.m. Lectio, I probably would have said I'm being a mystic.
Well, you know what Thomas Keating says is if you fall asleep during centering prayer, maybe you're tired. So just calm down, Yeah, anybody else about the idea of silence or anything else that popped out?
Yeah, I had a couple comments. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So one is, I've looked into a lot of different, Buddhism, et cetera, et cetera. And silence is in every one of them. Quieting the mind is in every one of them. So that tells me a lot. And then I wondered if you could comment maybe. I also noticed that being in the moment, in the present, is also a very common amongst around the world, basically. And those two seem like they're connected. Quiet the mind, be in the moment. So
Yeah. Well, and don't you think that the wisdom of this practice of going to silence is not unique just to Christianity? I mean, most other faith traditions have a silence practice. And I think that one of the things that Carl was speaking of earlier in his first quotes about Christian mysticism is grounded in the wisdom teaching of Jesus. And, we're going at this from a perspective of there is the divine presence. It's not nothing. There is an actual being that is the Christ presence. There's a power, the love, the beingness, the creativity, and we are not just like dissolving into it. We are unique parts of it. And so I think that allowing ourselves to recognize that it's not all on us, that there's grace coming to us, that we are wanted and created for this. It's what we're for, why we're here. And the idea of the meditative, like one of the things to keep in mind is many of the practices that we listed on there are concentrating, like we're concentrating on something. We're saying a prayer, we're saying the rosary, or in centering prayer, for example, we're emptying our minds. And there is a difference in those practices. Like when we're focusing on a mantra, for example, like in Eastern religion or with the Jesus prayer, we are doing something concretely. We're focusing on something. And that is okay. That's good. God can work through that. And then we also have the kind where we're intending to open and we're not even doing like focusing on anything. We're focusing on nothing, on being open and receptive and agreeing to God's presence. And the beautiful thing about that list that I showed earlier is that all of those practices are not the same. They're pretty different, actually, but there's a mystical thread in all of them. And so we might find ourselves for a while, for a season, really being into the rosary. And then maybe later on, it's like, I have to do centering prayer, and it's fine. God is everywhere and omnipresent, and God just wants us to open and turn toward God. And if we do, it will bear fruit. The fruit, not necessarily of what we think we're going for, but the fruit that God is cultivating in us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and since it's so common, amongst all traditions, I think mysticism is an avenue toward unification of humans across religions. which would be
Yeah.
a marvelous thing.
Well, and I'm associated with Contemplative Outreach, and so I have a bias toward that. But Thomas Keating, who was one of the founders of the Contemplative Outreach movement, was really in his older years working a lot on interfaith dialogue and, across the globe with people of different Eastern religions. And I think it was a natural development in his spiritual life to get to that point. Yeah.
Like, Thomas Merton, Thich Nhat Hanh was kind of his good buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And he was always going to the East too, Merton was. And then I also want to mention something here about John of the Cross, just briefly, and then we'll go on to another mystic we can get to know. This is that John of the Cross talks about the dark night. And we don't have time to get into the dark night, but one comforting thing to think about related to when we're confused, when everything falls apart, when everything we used to know or understand or believe is just disappeared, that might be one of the times when God is most available to us and we are most open to that because we're not holding on for dear life to what we know. It's been like the rug has been pulled out from under us. And so when we go into this mysticism, I think it's really lovely to keep in mind that it's not always floating around with angels. It could just be emptiness. It could be that we have to go through a period of a parched desert for a while so that we can let what we're clinging to dissipate as God fills us more and more with God's love. So I'm just mentioning that, and I chose John of the Cross in part because of his statement about silence, and also because the dark night of the soul is one of his major contributions, and it's something to keep in mind because I don't think it's all that foreign to most people. I think everybody in one way or another has had some pretty dark times.
I think I've listened to Turning to the Mystics the last few years from the CAC, and I think the thing that has most I guess impressed me with the mystics is the number of women and the way they write in such, well, like you're talking John of the Cross, well, Teresa Avila, a different take on it in that there's so much emphasis on the personal relationship. I mean, it's on this love, the way they write with love and beloved, and that this, for me anyway, for this emphasis or this take on God is really searching for you. He's really looking for you. He really wants you. And you hear that over and over and over in those Christian mystics. And to me, that's probably been the biggest thing I've taken away from that whole arena is that, yes, I'm searching and I'm wanting, but just that thought or the way they write that God is really wanting you. God is really looking for you, searching for you. And that was a new way for me to look at it. But there's just the mystics are not at all the same. They're different, they're different writings for each of them. But that one has been a big takeaway for me to have that kind of love language that you don't see. I had never seen before.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. And isn't that so different from some of the ways that some of us have been trained, that we have to earn our way to heaven?
Definitely.
As opposed to heaven is coming and trying to, love us into fuller being every minute if we would only allow it. It's like, no, go away. I've got this. Like, why? Why do we do that? It's part of our journey. Yeah.
There's such a strong connection with what Carol's saying. She brought up women, going back to the Eastern Western mind, it's like a masculine, feminine energy too. The Western energy is very masculine in definition and, but the women, the feminine energy tends to be more softer and more receptive and more open. And I've noticed it too, that just generally speaking today, that there just seems to be a lot more women open to kind of deepening their, so it might be more the energy healing or the energy world, but it's also still spirituality. There's just way more women gravitating towards this openness towards openness in general, softness towards connecting with spirituality.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it is interesting because, I think especially in our American culture, we're taught to, power through and be dominant, and I've got this, and I've got my checklist. And this is like that sneaking in through the back door kind of transformation of what we even care about or how we see situations. Like that person who was they are my enemy. And then through the process of opening to God's presence, we change and we see them differently. And we see ourselves differently. We see the whole situation differently, more with God's eyes. Okay, let's go on to this next slide, Dennis. I'm keeping you on your toes.
Oregon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brother Lawrence lived in the 1600s, and he was a French Catholic religious brother, and he was a cook in a monastery. And he had a few quotes here, and I would like us to go ahead and kind of engage with it prayerfully. I'm going to offer these quotes, and I invite us to sit in silence and reflect on how they land and notice, are you getting into your head and analyzing and okay, well, I'm not doing that, I should do that. Or is something in your heart being softened or challenged? Or maybe your body is feeling a release or a tightness or a resistance. So I'll just read these slowly. These are all from Brother Lawrence. We should establish ourselves in a sense of God's presence by continually conversing with him. It was a shameful thing to quit his conversation, to think about trifles and fooleries. Keep in mind, he was writing in the 1600s, so he's going to have different language. Okay, so here's the next one. Think often on God by day, by night, in your business and even in your diversions. He is always near you and with you. Leave him not alone. And then finally, there is not in the world a kind of life more sweet and delightful than that of a continual conversation with God. Those only can comprehend it who practice and experience it. So let's just rest a minute or so in silence and just see what's arising in each of us. And then we can open for some conversation. And I invite us to not try and to just see what arises as we invite God to be with us. And again, notice the invitation to listen to your body and your heart and your mind. perhaps one more thing I'll say, and then we'll have a little more silence, is thinking of the mind not so much as like a computer or a problem solver, but more as an organ of awareness. These are the things I'm thinking about, but I'm getting an awareness that I didn't have before. Hey, Dennis, would you go ahead and take down the slides again, please? We can just open for a little time of reflection or sharing. So if something's arising that you'd like to share or just kind of reflect on, just feel free to do so.
Yeah, I guess I noticed that I read in a book here that during the day, our thoughts, we probably think on thousands and thousands of things. And that, if that became a conversation with God, that's all day long. Thinking it over with God. That was a nice thought.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
I was reminded of Tevye on Fiddler of the Roof and how he's in continuous conversation with God all along. He's sometimes questioning, sometimes joking, sometimes pleading, but there's just a continuous conversation there.
Yeah. Thank you.
What I was struck, and the words that hit me were "leave him not alone." And I thought many times during the day, I forget to ask for his help. And it just kind of jumped right at me as you were reading that and looking at it, that, I pray, I have many times of meditation during the day, but, leave him not alone. He's there for us. It's just.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to me, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It seemed to me that it was like an answer to prayer, just because I have been asking the Lord for help with my thoughts and my so busy mind. It seems to be really getting in the way of my prayer, that I'm so mentally busy that even before I really realize it, I've gone off on another thought track. And so it gives me something to actively practice. So I am grateful for that.
Thank you. And you had something?
Sure. A friend of mine, Marco Lopez, he's a mindset coach. He's, Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins. He's trained with those kind of guys. One of the things he likes to teach me and others is about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. He says the conscious mind is optimized specifically for awareness, but we try to use it like a computer. He says our subconscious mind is a brilliant computer, and all you got to do is take those difficult problems and just hand it over to God or hand it over to your subconscious mind. Let it do all the heavy computational lifting and get those thoughts out of your head, and use your conscious mind for awareness. That's what it's optimized for. And that's, for these great mindset people, that's the secret philosophy they all want you to understand. But I think it is exactly true in our spiritual religious life as well, the same principle. I think to the extent that we can surrender those complicated problems to God and use our conscious mind to just try to build awareness and presence with God,
Yeah.
I think we'd be better for it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. And isn't it amazing? I mean, these guys aren't being particularly spiritual, but
Right.
wisdom is wisdom. You know? Yeah. Anybody else?
I always just think of scripture where, where it says pray always. And I guess that's kind of what it is. It's a continual conversation with God. And he will keep them in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. Just if somehow I could always be thinking of God, it would be in peace. So I'm thinking of God being there.
Yeah, it reminds me of that song, No Storm Can Shake My Inmost Calm. Yeah, no storm can shake
Inmost calm.
my inmost calm. Yeah. And in centering prayer, which I don't know if those of you who practice that or not, but one of the parts of centering prayer is to kind of look at our thought patterns as like a stream, and there are just these thought patterns happening. And we don't stop the thinking, we drop below it. So like I'm here in conscious, it's kind of like that subconscious conscious thing you were talking about a little bit. It's like, I know I'm going to be thinking, but I have an open tab on my awareness that is just for God. And these thoughts can come and go as long as I don't jump up and grab them, then I'm more open to this presence that is always here. And the benefit of centering prayer is that we're developing our muscle of being able to keep that openness to the divine, even as we're like, how can we drive and talk to somebody at the same time, right? We know where we're going, we know how to do the car, and we can also open ourselves to God that way, where we can just constantly have this awareness to God, even as we're doing all the other stuff. And that can shift our awareness in a given moment. We'll see things that we would have missed. We're more perceptive, solutions come or insights. So it's, I think what I'm saying is there are tons of ways of experiencing God in mystical experience. And so don't require it to be one way or the other, but also allow it to be mind-blowing. Like it will shift something.
There's some movement of, it's been a very interesting thought to me. Our consciousness really doesn't change throughout our life, but everything else about us does. Who I am. And so what if then our consciousness was sort of like our little bit of God, and all of our consciousnesses together is God? Then we're sort of with God all the time, if we think about it that way. That's a different way of looking at it, really. Then your busy mind is part of being with God. It's not like you got to shut it off. You're almost shutting off God when you shut off your busy mind. Then it's then feeling like you're connecting with God with that. That's an interesting thing to just explore, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, and we are humans. I mean, we have minds, and minds are going to think. We have hearts, and they're going to feel. And it's interesting that in the two quotes from Brother Lawrence, he was talking about, it's a shame to quit his conversation to think about trifles and fooleries. So that's the first quote. Don't get distracted by trifles and fooleries. And then in the next quote, he says, think of God by day and night in your business and even in your diversions. So wouldn't those be the trifles and fooleries? So
I'm here. I was feeling something though when he was on that first quote. It was, for me, it's like, and I'm sure we've all been there, when you're connected with God and you can feel that bond and that thread, and in those moments, it feels like Peter walking on water, and all of a sudden I lose, and I just let a thought about work or a thought about something. I let some kind of fear or some kind of anxiety step in, and all of a sudden it's like I lost that connect. God, no, come back, and I'm like, oh, I was there, I was with him, and I lost it because I was like Peter on the water, and I just decided for a moment, just a fraction of a second, to let a little bit of anxiety I let a little bit of that trifling kick in, and now all of a sudden, it's sad. It breaks. We had a thing there, and now I've lost you because I let fear or anxiety or whatever, the tiniest little thought, distract me from having my eyes single on that conversation and
Yeah,
and allowing his presence.
yeah,
So.
yeah,
I
really-
was thinking about what you said about the conscious and the unconscious, and my thoughts are not God's thoughts. So I might be thinking all these things or trying to figure these things out. Whereas if I could just, rest in God, that insight would come, that spiritual insight would come.
One of the things that's with that conversation that struck me is the wanting to get to know each other piece of it. It's not just having a hi, how you doing? How's the weather? It's having that heart to heart and wanting to get to know God as much as God getting to know me and back and forth, and not just the superfluous stuff, but getting down to the hard stuff of the conversation.
yeah,
Getting to know each other.
yeah. Yeah,
I would just say that Brother Lawrence on the CAC, the Turning to the Mystics podcast, that I think that's just been really wonderful. I'm not Catholic, but I followed this Jim Finney and the Turning to the Mystics this is his 10th season. And Brother Lawrence was the topic this year. I didn't follow it. I was doing some other things, but I mean, it's just really been transformative to me to listen to and read those books and to listen to his commentary, because like I said, to me it's just something that I had never been in touch with, that real personal connection. And so again, Turning to the Mystics is a podcast, and it's all free, and you could read the book or not, but if you know James Finney, just listen to James Finney for an hour is a gift, I think. So anyway, I just mentioned that.
yeah, thank you so much. And at the very last page of the slides, that podcast is listed. So if you didn't quite hear the whole name of it, it'll be up on the screen at the end. The other thing that Brother Lawrence said here is, those only can comprehend it who practice and experience it. And so reading about it is interesting and can help us get an eye for it. But we have to jump in the pool. We're invited to jump in the pool. We don't have to, but it's much better if we can.
I think that's the nice thing about that podcast is he always does a meditation. So there's a meditation from that particular standpoint. So you get a flavor of it.
Yeah.
I'll say is it used to seem weird and hard to jump in the pool. Heck, now I look forward to it. There's where peace and freedom lie. That's,
That was your image Saturday, Father Ron, with the
Deep sea diving.
yeah, deep sea diving into the faith. Yeah. You sit on the beach, or do you wade in, or do you dive in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there is that whole surrendering ourselves to become who we truly are. And if we jump into the deep end, we may not know how to swim, we may not know how to float. All of our tactics that we used to use when we were on the beach don't work anymore. But somehow we're more alive. We're more who we actually are. And so it's that paradox of surrender, of death to our ego, that allows our true self, our Christ participation, to flourish.
I do the analogy of the ocean, and you jump in because it's so foreign, and it's like you could die. Sometimes we find out we can breathe underwater and we didn't know it. And we're really kind of like home. So
Thank you. Anybody else before we go on to another one?
Buddhism was brought up earlier, and in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they talk about a bardo, which is the space between death and rebirth. And you can think about it in a meditation, you go deep into a meditation, you're transformed, you're reborn, you step into it, the space between. And it reminds me of Jesus telling Nicodemus, man must be born of the water and the spirit, and you cannot enter the kingdom of God. And so it's, to me, that rebirth that is being referenced to me, that is that process. I feel it when I make that connection to God, and it's difficult to do, but when you feel that total surrender, you feel him working in you, and just like, you're trying to I'm down with my ego, you take over, and he does. He helps you become a new creature. It's a new birth. It's a spiritual new birth in my view, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of where that quote. There's a quote somewhere in the book, the big book of Christian mysticism, about Mary giving birth to the Christ, and it's a very visceral, embodied experience of birthing the Christ, and this is happening in all of us all the time. And how does this happen? It's not happening physically necessarily. It's happening as we welcome this presence that keeps us alive anyway, to consent to it growing and becoming more vibrant in us. Okay, let's try this third one. We have Meister Eckart. He was from the 1200s, so we're just jumping around a little bit here. And he was a German priest. So again, let's go into silence, and I will read the words. And if you like to look at the words, you can, but you may find that listening allows them to be more evocative for you. We'll just see what arises as we open to the presence of the Spirit through these quotes from Meister Eckart. There exists only the present instant, a now, which always and without end is itself new. There is no yesterday, nor any tomorrow, but only now. As it was 1,000 years ago, and as it will be 1,000 years hence. We are celebrating the feast of the eternal birth, which God the Father has borne and never ceases to bear in all eternity. But if it takes place not in me, if it takes not place in me, what avails it? Everything lies in this, that it should take place in me. The feast of the eternal birth taking place in each of us. You may call God love, you may call God goodness, but the best name for God is compassion. I don't want to interrupt, but a gentle invitation to notice if you've gone into your head. Remember, the heart and the body are here too.
When I saw God is compassion, I thought about empathy, you know, being with people in their pain, whatever, what they're feeling, being with them in that empathy, compassion.
Thank you.
I think for me, the first quote reminded me of heaven, that we will just always know as we are known, and that will be the eternal now.
Well, thank you.
The best name for God is compassion. Well, that just wipes away all the judgmental or negative images of God waiting for us to make a mistake, or that he has compassion when we make a mistake.
Father Ron, I remember during the year of mercy, and it was like 10 or 15 years ago, and there were all these different classes you could go to, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go to another class, or another thing. Well, certainly I'm going to learn all about mercy. Like, I probably heard it all by now, right? It was just more and more and more, and like the depths of what mercy is. And that year, what I heard was, the name for God is mercy. And the way I think of it is like, I've been around a lot of toddlers in my life, and you know, when they have like a dirty diaper, maybe their nose is runny, they're throwing up, they're messy, they have jelly all over them, they're crying or they're having a tantrum. And the mother goes right over there and just goes right into it all and hugs them and brings them close and gently wipes them and loves them beyond all of that. And so when I think of like compassion or mercy, like, who is this being that we're with? Well, it's the same being that's breathing us to life every minute. Like, what is our image of God makes a difference as to whether we're willing to enter into a surrendered mystical experience.
What's the line? I don't want sacrifice, I desire mercy. Well, sacrifice is like us trying to earn. Mercy is you just get it. It's for us, free gift. That's compassion.
Well, and the kind of sacrifice that we might want to do, like, you know, I'm going to sacrifice, I don't know, I like potato chips, you know, I'm going to sacrifice potato chips. That's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but I think of it more like, if I'm irritated with my husband and I sacrifice, or I'm willing to allow my view, what I think is right, to be transformed, and to not do it like, okay, I stubbornly say, okay. It's more like opening enough to be able to see, to understand, to get where he's coming from, and maybe not to be understood in return at that moment. Like, that is a sacrifice, but it's not the same kind of sacrifice as often what we think of, you know. It's just a little musing on my part here.
Right. Wife says something that annoys me, I think of myself, and it annoys me, and that's me. If I can convert that to, do I see some call for help from her? It switches from defense to compassion, and
Yeah,
that's like a world of difference.
and it's a grace. It's a grace and a transformation of our hearts and our minds and our Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, just whether you want to call God compassion or mercy, or, you know, in my mind, a loving, perfect God, a perfect Father who just can be whatever we truly need in whatever moment we're in.
Mhm.
Sometimes we need a little bit of a smack upside the head. I know I do sometimes, and sometimes I'm eternally grateful that God's willing to do that to me. You know, and other times I need the compassion
Yeah.
and the mercies.
Yeah, we don't know what form it's going to take.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple things I also want to mention. Carol Houselander, Caryll Houselander. She's a British woman who lived, I think, in the 50s. She had an experience on the subway where she just saw all the people and loved them so, so much. And that's similar to Thomas Merton in America, who was at the corner of 4th and Walnut, I think is in, was it Louisville, Kentucky? And just walking along, and all of a sudden he saw all the people like shining like the sun, like that beautiful trueness of our true essential selves. And like that is a mystical seeing, a mystical consciousness, a mystical awareness. And you know, he didn't plan, he's like, I'm gonna go down there to 4th and Walnut and have this experience. But he had been doing different practices and opening himself. And I don't even think that it's necessarily a cumulative teaching. I'm not beginning to say how quickly God can go as fast or slow as God wants in helping us to arrive at these points. But these things happen and we don't make them happen, but we get to participate. And it changes everything. And Carol also talks about, like one of her books is called The Reed of God. And the idea, like a reed is a hollow, you can make a flute out of it. So how is God coming through us and making a beautiful sound or a beautiful presence? And that is part of like a mystical experience, you know. And I like to think of kind of like, I was playing around with the idea of having us do a little exercise where we each stand up and walk around just gently, being really conscious of the presence of God and the inhabiting of our being with this divine presence. So let's open for some more questions or thoughts or reflections.
Who is the person? The
Thich Nhat Hanh did mindful walking.
Who's that come from?
Mindful walking. That's what that thought made me think of.
A mindful walk?
Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist mindful walking. I think I read a little bit on that. Where every step he's in the moment, he's in the step. That's what I thought of when you said that. Get up and walk around.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Someone was asking here about the name of the mystic in the British woman. It's Caryll, Caryll.
Okay.
Houselander. She was just I think she was a regular housewife. I don't remember. I'm not a big expert on her, but that's the point. Aren't we all just regular people?
Curious, how would you define, I know you had a definition of mysticism at the very beginning, but when you think about this century, you mentioned Merton and you mentioned Thurman. Who else would you maybe define as a mystic? Would you define Houselander, or I guess when and where is a person declared to be a mystic? I guess would be my question.
Good question.
Carol Birch is one.
There you go.
No. Yeah. But I would say I had an experience not in several times, and I don't know, I'm sure probably most of you can relate to this, but it's been my personal experience of something that we're describing here when I've been in a situation, and it's been when I've been in with a group of people in a very loving situation, usually family. And for me, it hits me, and this has happened, I'd like to think it happened more than it has, but it's happened 2 or 3 times in my life when I look out. And I also have had it happen in nature. And the sentence hits me, it doesn't get any better than this. And there's just an opening that I have, there's a feeling that comes over me that just says, it doesn't get any better than this. And it's just, to me, that's kind of similar to what you're talking about when you look out and you think, as Merton described his experience in Louisville, it may not be the exact same thing, but to me, it's very close to that when I can feel that, it just, and that's the words that always come to me. It doesn't get any better than this.
According to Carl Rahner, we're all mystics, right? Just in training.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you say it again?
According to Carl Rahner, I think we're all just mystics in training.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's our goal as Christians.
As you were talking about Carol Hauslander and the reed, and the flowing through us, and Eckhart's quote about, if it doesn't happen in me, where does it avail? And Carol, she was describing, she was talking about this, a feeling that comes over her, and what it's reminding me of is last year when Father Ron led a study of what turned out to be Pope Francis's last apostolic letter. And there was a meditation on the Sacred Heart. And it really is, I say it's kind of a mystical document, a document that talks about contemplative practice and prayer. But what struck me about that, and as I learned more about these kinds of things, is that it's not, I think typically you think about, mystic, they go off away from the world and they sit quietly and they kind of float up or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But really what all we're talking about is that how embodied all of this is, how incarnate it really is.
Yeah.
And I just see the connections. I mean, it connects you more and more with the world, with the creation, with the other people around us, those bonds, you can't deny them. And so, and that's Richard Rohr's whole organization. It's, contemplation and action.
Right.
It takes us back into the world. It doesn't disconnect us. It connects us tighter and tighter and tighter and makes that embodiment, that incarnation. And I don't know, I'm continually impressed by that.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, I make things in my basement, just wooden things, and if I can, as I'm working on it, be right with that one thing I'm doing, turning that shape or smoothing that finish, and I'm not thinking about the next thing or what my next project is, or when I can get in, it's sort of a rhythm of the thing I'm doing. That is the most fulfilling. And it's also when the stuff just comes out the best, is because I'm there with that. It's just like you're walking around mindfully. You're just in that moment, Meister Eckhart's first thing about everything's in that moment. That's where I feel it the most distinctly.
Thank you. Well, and isn't that also true about healing? We were just talking about that at Souljourners, that like that moment, like say I share something, with you and it's vulnerable and sad, and you hear me and you acknowledge me, something in my being releases. In my physical body, it's like I become more loved. I become more able to love. And it's like all of this stuff that we're doing matters. It's not like we're, like the kingdom of heaven is accessible to us now. You know, when we talk about creating the kingdom of God, we are. And as we sit here and listen to each other and witness each other and honor each other's experiences, we're doing it. We're engaging, we're saying yes, we're open in our bodies, in our humanity.
Reminds me of trying to get healthy. I'm on a journey to try to get healthy. That's why I brought it. It's for all of you, not me.
Thank you.
All of you too. So when there's so much diversity in people's health, and some people are just naturally, genetically really healthy, and some of us, have to really work at things. But like you go through so many different kinds of exercises, whether it's running or squatting or lifting weights, and sometimes in the journey of running or lifting weights, you obtain that sense of health. You like, I'm there. Like even though I'm in the process of exercising,
Yeah.
I feel healthy. And more often than not, at least for me, I don't, and I'm doing it because I want to become healthy. Or analogously, I want that connection with God. I want to be able to be one with God and connected with Him. So I do the spiritual walk, the spiritual exercises. More often than not, I'm not necessarily having that connection with God or feeling healthy. But we put in the time, and I think that's why we do some of those Western right brain activities, because they can lead to those breakthroughs whenever God in His mercy wants to give that to us.
Yeah.
We're more prepared because we've exercised.
Yeah. What is it they say? Luck favors the prepared, something like that. Well, and there was something else. Oh, in centering prayer, often just sitting in silence with God and trying to just be open and consent to God's presence and action without attaching to any of my thoughts can be awful, because it's like I keep thinking my thoughts. But one of the wise things about the centering prayer teaching is that the fruits of the practice don't come during the practice. They come at surprising moments, because the transformation is happening. Whatever practices we choose, that is where we're opening ourselves intentionally to the nourishment and the transforming power of God's love. And being welcomed. We're welcoming God, helping us to bring that to life in ourselves. And it might seem like it's a terrible marathon run, but then the next day we're going to be with our kids or somebody, and we'll be like, I'm more patient or something, or I've got a creative idea for this problem, So yeah, it's not all for naught, but it's interesting because like if I go into it with my agenda, it's very different than if I go into it open to what God's agenda is.
I really wish it only took 2 months of exercise and I could be healthy for the rest of my life.
I did it, check the box.
I went to the gym for 2 months. Can I be done now?
And I've just decided to do the contemplative prayer, and I heard you say sit. That sounds good to me.
Sitting. Okay, well, we just have a few minutes left, and I'd like to just pull up the slides for one last moment. And if anybody has any last questions, just keep it in mind, and we'll get the slides down again in a second. I just wanted to show you. Let's see here. Okay, there's the list of the practices that are recommended in this big book of Christian mysticism, which is just one of the resources that I like a lot. I'm going to go to this next page. Here are just a few resources. As you can tell, there are tons of things out there, but the big book of Christian mysticism is one. Turning to the Mystics, the podcast that Carol was speaking of. One of the practices that is listed is going to a spiritual director. So there's spiritual direction and also training to be a spiritual director if you're interested in doing that at Sophia Center in Atchison. And on this slide, I have the links, and I think I'll check with Dennis to see if I could just send it out as an email later. The book Intimacy with God by Thomas Keating he's one of the people who was really a key person in bringing centering prayer or contemplative prayer to the modern era to regular people, not just sticking with the monasteries only. And then there are centering prayer groups. which I personally love and I'm involved in. And so Contemplative Outreach Kansas City has a list of different resources in person or online, where if you're interested in exploring that, it's one form of opening to mystical experience. It's not the only one. And let's go back to the list for a minute there. I'll send this out in an email or work with Dennis to get it done. But you can see there are lots of different things. And so one of the things that really strikes me is there's a lot of potential, a lot of creativity, a lot of discovery. And we can trust our own interest. Like Howard Thurman actually says, one of the 20th century mystics, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And so if something on this list strikes you and like makes you come alive a little bit, like, I really want to do some service. I want to go down here near the bottom, practicing mercy and forgiveness, or whatsoever you do to the least of these, that feels really compelling. That can be a mystical practice. It can be an opening to a mystical experience of the divine. So I just invite you to take a look at these and trust your instinct. Trust the spirit praying in you, the longing coming from you. So Dennis, let's take this down again and just see if there's anything anybody wants to say, or we'll do a very brief tone of the bell to close our time.
Thank you, Kristina. That was a great session. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for offering your parts of conversation. And we're going to have to figure out how to, like, the recording is not easy to remove personal sharing. So we'll have to talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything, did somebody say something tonight they don't want put on a video someplace?
I'm good with leaving myself speak.
Okay, well, if you change your mind, let Dennis know soon.
And I'll go ahead and I'll make a PDF copy of the slideshow, and that'll be available on the website tomorrow, and I'll send out a link to everybody through the email with it. The video will take a little bit longer to get posted, but it'll be up there eventually. And our past sessions are also videos of those are available too, if you want to take a look at those, and various handouts and things.
Yeah.
And July, actually, Greg, is mindful walking. So haven't figured out how we're going to do that online yet, but that's why it's in July.
Well, it'll be a thought exercise, perhaps.
Wear a body camera.
Oh,
GoPro or
Get
whatever.
on treadmill or.
Okay, so I am going to invite Dennis to switch this audio, not quite yet, but get ready to switch it, hit the caret part next to it, the little at the bottom, and get ready to switch to original sound, but not quite yet because it'll goof up me talking. When I ring the bowl, I invite each of us to allow it to be like a reminder, like the vibration of it to be a reminder of receiving the breath, being an embodied being with heart and mind, and all we are is open and aware recipients of grace and love. And we trust whatever that evokes in us. So let's do this now. I'll ring it. Oops, did it go? Yep, here we go. Switch it back to the regular audio. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions, you can contact me through Dennis, and I'll be happy to try to help in whatever way. So
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
let's go
Thank you.
forth in presence.
Yes. Thank you.
Amen. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.